Hello, hello, hello. Thank you for being here. I'm Dr. Perkins, a board certified OBGYN. And so I love having these conversations about things that are on your mind. And so today's topic is, can hormonal birth control cause infertility? And so we're going to dive into quite a few different things today. First, we'll talk about hormonal birth control, what they are and what that looks like. We'll talk about the reversibility of fertility. We'll also break down the age and fertility concerns that exists. And we'll talk about post-birth control syndrome. All right, so we're going to start today by talking about a myth. And today's myth is, if I take birth control, I won't be able to get pregnant. I've heard this so many times, and I'm sure you may have heard it too, and you may have thought it in the past. Can birth control prevent you from getting pregnant? Yes, while you're on it. But once you discontinue it, does it prevent fertility from occurring? And the answer is no. There has been no evidence-based medicine that has supported infertility occurring secondary to having been on hormonal birth control in the past. Now, let's first talk about hormonal birth control and how it works. Typically, there are several different types of birth control out there. When I discuss birth control options with patients, I usually kind of separate them between both hormones, estrogens and progesterones, or one hormone, progesterone. And so when we think of the side that has both hormones, we're thinking about pills. We're thinking about the ring, the vaginal ring. We're thinking about the patch that goes on top of the skin. With these birth control options, both hormones, estrogens and progesterones, are incorporated within them, and they are supposed to kind of mimic what your body normally and naturally does throughout the menstrual cycle. And so this is how this looks. In the first half of your cycle, estrogens are being released more prominently in your system. Then you ovulate, and then after ovulation, progesterones are pumped into your system greater than estrogens. And so when you take a birth control option that has both hormones, this should mimic what your body normally does. And then at the end of the month or the end of your 4-week period, so somewhere around that last week, whether on the pill, the patch, or the ring, you should have a bleed. And that bleed is called a withdrawal bleed. It's very similar to a period. And so each 4-week cycle, you'll have a bleed. Now, on the other hand, when you have birth control options that are progesterone only, we're considering the depot injection, the Nexplanon, which sits beneath your skin in your arm, the IUD, which is a T-shaped device that goes inside of your uterus. 4 of them. 1 does not have hormones, but that's an IUD. And those are progesterone only options. Now, we do not have estrogen only options, at least not for birth control purposes. And the reason is estrogens by themselves can lead to bad things like cancer of the uterus and the breast, and it can cause a lot of ugly things. So we don't want estrogens alone in our system. Progesterone, on the other hand, can be in a birth control by itself because progesterones are protective. They actually help to protect your uterus and your ovaries and your pelvic organs. And so progesterones are great. And so we have 3 versions of progesterone only options. There's also a pill that is a progesterone only pill. We also call those POPs. These are the options that we have that are progesterone only. Now, birth control on a whole, regardless of the side that you're on or the type that you're taking, can be used short term for just a month, or can be used for many, many, many years. Now, what happens over time is that as you're on birth control potentially, internally, you were, as a female, born with all the eggs you'll ever have. And at the point of birth, we have millions of eggs. By millions, literally, like 2 to 3 million eggs that you're born with. When you're conceived, you have even more. And so what happens over time is that those eggs are breaking down every single day. Today, you have less eggs in your body, if you're not menopausal, than you did yesterday. And that process continues until all your eggs are completely depleted, and that's usually by the age of 51, roughly. And when we think about between puberty and menopause, on average, you have about 450 50 periods. That means out of 2 to 3 million eggs, you are only making use of potentially 450 of them. And so considering that, our fertility goes down technically every single day. And that's regardless of whether or not we are on birth control. And so sometimes this creates confusion when we think of a person who started birth control at the age of 20 and now she's 35 and she's ready for a child. She comes off of the birth control after 15 potential years, and now her cycles are not as regular or she's having difficulty getting pregnant. And the question is it because she's been on this birth control for the last 15 years that it completely got rid of her fertility or affected her fertility? Or is it that she's had 15 years of her eggs depleting every day, as is normal biologically, and now she is at a point where her eggs are few in number because she's gone through the natural decline of her eggs every day? And that's actually what truly happens. But sometimes we want to correlate the two things and say one thing caused the other, and that's usually not the case. Now, when you're on birth control and you stop that birth control, at that point, your body should relatively quickly return to your current state of fertility. And so if you've been on it for a year, your fertility has changed a little bit in a year. If you've been on it for 10 years, your fertility probably has changed quite a bit since then. And so you'll return to your normal state in a relative amount of time. And so let me kind of dive into what that potentially may look like. If you're on any of the birth control options that I mentioned earlier that has both hormones, the pills, the patch, or the ring, you may have the quickest return to your fertility. In general, 1 to 3 months, your body will return to its normal cycles and hormonal controls. If you're on some of the progesterone only ones, like the depot, from my experience and clinically we find evidence of the same, the depot takes the longest time to return to your normal fertility. And sometimes that could be up to 2 years after you've discontinued use. And so if you're using that birth control, I usually talk to patients to kind of give that time frame. So if you're thinking about pregnancy in a year, let's stop your depot a lot earlier compared to if you were to use the pill, the patch, or the ring. Now, the Nexplanon, or the implant, as well as the IUD, those actually have a fairly quick return to fertility as well. And so in general, that's 2 to 3 months as well. So the only real true outlier here is a depot injection. Now, if you were on the Paragard or the IUD that has no hormones, your fertility is pretty instant. So oftentimes if you were going to ovulate next week, you're still ovulating on your own because it's a non-hormonal IUD. And so it's not impacting the changes internally as the hormonal birth control options would. In general, research shows that there is no long-term impact on your fertility while you're on hormonal birth control. It also shows that the time to conception is actually quite similar to someone who has never used birth control ever before. What I also want to mention here is that sometimes being on birth control can mask other conditions that have naturally developed in our system. Sometimes we're not aware of having blood pressure issues or diabetes or, PCOS because you've been on birth control this entire time. And so when you come off of birth control, we're now releasing your body to actually function the way it normally would without any hormonal control. And so oftentimes we find that things have changed internally because of that. And so getting a new diagnosis is actually something that is likely after you've discontinued long-term use of birth control. So I have a few tips for you. When you are transitioning off of birth control, I would recommend that you, one, have a conversation with your doctor, especially if you're planning on actually getting pregnant and potentially wanting, children. Have a conversation with your doctor about what that may look like initially. Create a time and schedule together when you would like to get pregnant by. Talk about How much time do we give you in general when you're under the age of 35? We recommend that you practice or try for pregnancy for about 12 months. When you're older than 35, we shorten that to 6 months. And so we want you to actually talk to your doctors about this entire landscape and how that may look. I also highly recommend that you're supporting your body internally and externally as well. Make sure that we're eating well, or nutrition is just optimized. You're exercising, you're treating your body well, you're not under very stressful conditions. Cortisol is never a good thing. Control all the things that you can. Trust the process and talk with your providers. Now, I hope this information has been helpful for you today. Listen, there's another video that I think would be very helpful. And so I've actually listed it here in the description just to help you on your way. And you can join me and we'll talk more about this topic a little bit more deeply and things that I think will help you on your journey. Click the link in the description. Thank you so much for being here. Leave a comment if you want to share something with the rest of us. Thank you for being here. I'm Dr. Perkins, and let's see you in the next video.